Alright, in this video we're going to be exploring both linear and quadratic regression and also how to input information into our stat plot. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going to our list, and so your list is above your stat, so we're going to press our stat button and we're going to edit our list by pressing edit. Okay, so we can see that we have all of our lists available to us to use, and to enter in our information we're just going to enter in our numbers. So let's enter in the numbers 0 through 5 in L1 or list 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then we can cursor over to list 2 and we can enter in some y values, and let's enter in -5, -2.5, 0, 2.5, 5, and 7.5. And so you can tell that this is going to be a linear relationship, and so we're going to now use this information to graph the information that's in our lists and to come up with a regression equation for it. So one thing just to be clear about is that if you want to make sure that your both list 1 and list 2 have the same number of values in there, like for example if I had 7 values in my L1 compared to the 6 that are in there for L2, if I went to go and try and graph this, which we can try, we can press graph. Oh, and currently our stat plot isn't on. So before we're able to look at this error, let's go ahead and explore turning on our stat plot. And your stat plot is right above your y equals button. So we're going to press second y equals to go to our stat plot. And notice it says it's off. So let's press enter to enter our stat plot. And you can see that the off is currently selected. So we're going to press enter to turn it on. Quickly though, let's explore the different options you have when you're plotting information that are in your lists. And if you can see, I'm using Smart View. Down here underneath my table in my graph form, down here you can see that I have error, dimensions mismatch, and that's what I was referencing to. Since I have 7 numbers in my list and in my L1 and only 6 in L2, I'm getting this error, this dimension mismatch. So we'll continue to explore that, but it's cool that we can already see that in our graph version here on Smart View. So when I go to graph my information, I can graph a scatter plot, a line graph, I've got a bar graph option, box and whiskers, and so there's lots of different options you have here. For your X list and your Y list, when we input our lists into our stat plot, we want to make sure that we're defining our variables. So we're telling the calculator that we want to use list 1, our 0 through 5, as our X values, and we want to use our list 2, our -5 to 7.5, as our Y values. And so then we also have the option to change the marking. And if you have a color version of the 84 plus, you can change the color here. In our classrooms we won't have the color option, but this Smart View has that color option as well. Alright, so now that we have our stat plot on, we're going to press graph, and that's when we're going to see this error, dimension mismatch. And that's because if you remember, I have more numbers in my L1 than I have in my L2. So let's go back and edit that. Let's press stat. Oh, whoops, first we need to quit this error. Quit the error. Now we can press stat, go back to edit, and we can go down to delete that value from our L1. We'll delete it. Now when I go to graph, voila, I see my points graphed on my calculator. And so we see that I have the marks exactly how I had it. Notice that it's going to default to your standard window. And since all of our X and Y values were less than 10 and within our standard window frame, which is -10 to +10 on our X's and -10 to +10 on our Y values, that's why I'm able to see everything. So if for some reason you pressed graph and you did not see your data, you may just need to reset your window. So now let's look at how we can take this information and turn it into a regression equation. So what I can do is I can go to my stat And instead of being in my edit column, I'm going to go to my calc column, calc being short for calculate. And let's tell the calculator what we want it to calculate. We want it to calculate linear regression. And so here I have calc 4, linear regression, and I'm going to press enter. Now the calculator is going to have all this information, and I could go ahead down here and I could press calculate and it would give me my equation. But a nice function that I have here is I have the ability to store the regression equation in my y equals. And so the way that I do that is I press vars, and once you press vars, we can go to y vars over once and then select function. And that's going to allow us to choose y1 as the destination for my regression equation. And so now I can go in and press calculate. Not only has it calculated my linear regression equation, but now when I go to my y equals, that equation is input or already in my y equals. So now when I press graph, I not only see my stat plot, the information in my list, but I also see the regression equation that I told my calculator to graph. So that is linear regression. So now let's explore quadratic regression. Let's go ahead and go back to our list by pressing Stat and Edit. And just for the sake of things, let's go ahead and list or keep our L2 in there so that we can see our linear regression. And let's explore what it looks like to input more than one set of data on the graph at the same time. So now in list 3, let's input the values -2, -4, 0, 10, 26, and 48. And once again, I want to make sure that I have the same number of values in my L3 that I have in my L1. Okay, but now I need to make sure that my stat plot is turned on to graph my L3 values using my L1 as my X values. So let's go into our stat plot. And we can leave plot 1 on because if you remember, plot 1 was graphing our linear relationship. Okay, so then let's go back and let's turn on plot 2. So plot 2, we're going to turn that one on, but instead of using L2 as our y values, we're going to use L3. And so the way that we're going to get that list is by going to second stat, which allows me to get to my list, and it allows me to choose the name of the list that I want to use as my y values, and I'm going to tell it I'd like L3. And so now I have L3 input for my quadratic plot points. I could even use a different marker as I go down. Instead of using the little rectangle or the little square, I could use the little plus sign. And again, if you have a color option, we could also change the color to be something different. And so now my stat plot is on, so when I press graph, I should see these values. Okay, and this is a great example of not being able to see all of our values. We know that in L2, we had values that were 48. We had 48 as our fifth y value. So we can go ahead and change our window and tell it that for our x maximum, we want to include values all the way up to 50 because we know that we need to hit up to 48. And if we even want to, we can reset our x min and or our y max. Oh, sorry, that's not our y. This needs to stay at 10. We need to change our y max to 50. There we go. All right, so now when I graph it, I'll be able to see all of my points, and how beautiful is that? Okay, so now let's come up with a regression equation for our quadratic relationship. Okay, so we're going to, again, calculate. So we're going to go to Stat, and then we're going to go to Calc. And instead of telling it to calculate our linear regression like we did the first time, you notice that number 5 has your quadratic regression option. So we're going to press Enter. And then just like last time, notice here our y list says L2. We're going to need to change that. because we told it that our list was L3. And instead of storing our regression equation in y1, we already have our linear regression equation there. So this time when I press vars and y values function, I want it to store in y2, so that way I can have both regression equations in my y equals at the same time. So when I press calculate, it's going to calculate my regression equation, and ta-da! It's in my y equals. I see my quadratic equation in my y equals. So now when I go to graph, I not only have my my linear relationship with the regression equation, but I also have my quadratic relationship with the regression equation. And so we've explored linear regression and quadratic regression and inputting those values into your stat plot. I hope that you've learned something today, and thank you for listening.